I'm Linda Hirsch, and this is EdCast, a program created and produced by educators for everyone interested in education. As September unfolds, campuses across the country are welcoming their incoming freshmen. For many of these students, going to college is a dream fulfilled, the culmination of years of study, hard work, and sacrifice. It is a dream propelled by the belief that college is essential to a successful life. Yet, is college the engine of social mobility we've come to expect? The system of who gets into college and why remains shrouded in mystery and myth. Today, I'll speak with author Paul Tough about the college experience and the way it serves and disserves young people. Join us for a behind-the-scenes look at college today, from getting in to staying in. It's college as seen through the eyes of those who always expected to be there and those who still aren't sure they belong. Now on EdCast. Joining me today is Paul Tough, author of The Years That Matter Most, How College Makes or Breaks Us. He's written 3 previous books, including the best-selling How Children Succeed, Grit, Curiosity, and the Hidden Power of Character. Paul Tough writes exclusively about education, parenting, and politics, and is a frequent contributor to media outlets such as the New Yorker, The Atlantic, GQ, and the New York Times. Thank you so much for joining us today on EdCast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As a CUNY faculty member, obviously your book is really important to me, and it probably is one of the most relevant books I'm going to be reading this year. So let's talk a little bit about it. What prompted the book?
Well, I've been writing about education now for more than a decade, but I think the thing that really fascinates me about education is this process of social mobility, this way that young people are able to change their lives, especially kids who grow up without a lot of resources or means. And what struck me is that in the United States today, it's those years right after high school that make such a difference when we're talking about mobility. So that was what I wanted to explore.
And how did you research the book?
I went all over the place. So I spent 6 years working on it. I went to 21 different states. A lot of my reporting was on individual students. I really wanted to spend extended amounts of time with a number of young people at the end of high school and the beginning of college, trying to understand their experience of the higher education process. But then I also spent a lot of time talking to administrators, to economists, to sociologists, trying to understand the larger background and perspective of what's going on in higher education.
Your book opens with some scenes about a person who's applied to college. I think is it Kim?
Shannon.
Shannon, I'm sorry. Shannon, the one the book opens with Shannon, and her anxiety about getting into college. So let's talk. And so much in your book is about getting into college and how that is a weighted system. Let's talk a little bit about that. What happens to minority students of low income? What's their college application process like?
Well, there are all sorts of obstacles to kids who grow up low income and working class kids. There's all kinds of obstacles that are keeping them from getting into the colleges they want to go to and keeping them from succeeding when they are there. And so, you know, Shannon was a super high achieving student at a public school in Harlem. And when I was sitting there with her, it was the day that the Ivy League admission announcements were coming out. And so I was there with her as she got her news. And it was intense, you know. I mean, I think in her case, her aspirations and her abilities were huge. But when you look at the larger landscape, what you see is that our system of higher education is really stratified. So at the most selective institutions, almost every student is from the top income quintile, and kids like Shannon, who are from the bottom income quintile, there are very, very few of them at the most selective institutions. And at institutions that are more heavily populated with low-income kids, those are the institutions that we have been denying resources to. So there is an intense stratification, and it's getting worse.
You've raised some very interesting things that I really hadn't thought that much about, and that is, why do you think minority students often do not apply to the most prestigious schools, even if they have a decent shot of getting in, and sometimes they don't accept the school when they get in? What did you notice there?
The one thing I would just say about that question is that, so you talked about minority students.
Yeah.
The study, I mean, but the study that by this woman, Carolyn Hoxby, this economist, that talks about the patterns that different students have, she's talking about low-income students, which and certainly includes a lot of minorities, but actually the place where she saw this pattern most intensely was in white rural students who were high achievers in their remote high schools, but because no one around them was applying to a highly selective institution, they weren't going to those institutions. And so I think it's a mix of things. I mean, I think part of what is keeping more low-income kids from going to those most selective institutions is test scores. A big part of it is money. I mean, you know, these are places that cost a lot of money. Some have good financial aid, but a lot don't, and that's a big barrier. And then I think there is also sort of a cultural, social, emotional feel among a lot of students and their families who feel like going off to somewhere that is so sort of intensely rich and elite is not really where they'll be comfortable or where they'll feel like they belong.
Well, you do go into you relate some interesting stories about students who enter these selective campuses and how they feel. So let's talk a little bit about what are some of the challenges that first generation, low-income and or minority students face when they end up on a campus that's selective.
Yeah, so there's been some great research done. There's this sociologist at Harvard named Anthony Abraham Jack who put out a great book called The Privileged Poor, and he talks about this experience of first-generation students at highly selective institutions. I follow this one young woman named Kiki from North Carolina who grew up in real poverty and is now a student at Princeton, and so I followed her through her first year. And all of them, I mean, I think our stereotype is that those kids are going to struggle academically at those institutions. In most cases, and certainly in Kiki's case, she's doing great academically, but it is more of a cultural experience that she's really experiencing culture. She really experienced culture shock, and that's something I think that happens to lots of first-generation students when they get into these sort of places of concentrated wealth and privilege.
Suddenly they're around kids who have so much that they never could even conceive of anybody having so much. You also mentioned something that at Trinity, I believe you said, the groups don't mix that well, and I found I wasn't so surprised, but I think that's another barrier. I mean, when you get there, if you've decided to accept and go, then you find out that you feel kind of alienated and you're kind of isolated. Was that a common experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think
in that situation?
I think it's different for every student. I think that often at the beginning of college, there's more of that feeling. You know, I think some colleges do a good job of integrating their low-income students into the life of the campus.
And some students take it upon themselves, right? You mentioned a group called the IVG, where they really just all get together to kind of
so this is this sort of new phenomenon that first generation students at Ivy and other highly selective institutions are sort of now identifying themselves as a group and making connections not only within their campus but with kids on other campuses as well.
So a lot of these campuses will say they're doing everything they can to diversify their campus and they're taking in a lot of low-income kids, and you say not so much really. So let's talk about that. What's the reality?
Well, so, I mean, the main data to address this was this study that was done by the economist Raj Chetty back in 2017. He calls it the Mobility Report Cards, and he, used decades of tax data to really answer this question at every institution. What's the makeup of the student body from each income quintile? And what he found is that at the most highly selective institutions, including Ivy League colleges, there are very few low-income students. At Princeton, it's like 2.2% of the student population is from the bottom quintile, and almost 3/4 is from the top income quintile. So, they're way out of balance.
And they have the resources if they wanted to accommodate more. You also said, interestingly, they use Pell eligible students, but they take the ones at the highest point of the cutoff. So they're the most affluent of the Pell bunch, so to speak. I thought that was really interesting. Now, you do a lot of talk about the SAT and the ACT. And I have to say that at one point, I think you compare the College Board kind of to the tobacco companies and the oil industry. So, them's fighting words. So let's talk about the SAT and the ACT and why you see them as really obstacles.
So, I think there's two levels in which I did that reporting. I mean, one is just sort of this big question.
How important is the SAT and the ACT as a predictor of student success?
It's somewhat important. It's not as good a predictor as high school grades. And so there are increasing numbers of institutions that are going test optional, that are admitting students without standardized tests, just focusing on high school grades. And you know, the research is still mixed on how effective that is, but mostly those institutions are finding that that high school grades are a great predictor of how well students will do, and they can select an excellent class without using SAT scores. The reason that I said that about the College Board is that during the time that I was doing this reporting, they were undergoing this public relations campaign to change the public perception of the SAT. So people, I think, for a long time have believed, and I think rightly, that the SAT benefited rich kids and was an obstacle to a lot of poor kids.
Although its genesis was meant just to be the opposite.
Exactly.
If you remember, you know, the SAT was meant to level the playing field and, you know,
totally,
students go totally on ability rather than income. And
right, and so I mean, there's a long, complicated history of these tests,
right.
and so, but they were really trying to change that. And so what I found in my reporting was that a lot of the work that they were doing to change public perceptions was mostly about perceptions and not about reality.
Talk about the one, I want people to be aware of this because I remember this incident. Talk about what they did to convince people that the SAT was better than the GPA. They tell us a little bit about that. They took their own data and kind of didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah, so it's
a
pretty complicated. It's a pretty complicated study about grade inflation, about whether or not there is grade inflation, and whether that benefits wealthy students more than poor students. What I see in their data is that mostly GPAs have been rising. The GPAs have been going up. There is grade inflation,
yeah.
But that it's mostly happening for every race and every students with all sorts of parental education levels, pretty much in tandem, in parallel. But at the same time, there's been this divergence in test scores and SAT scores. And so rich kids are doing better in SAT scores, Asian and white kids are doing better in SAT scores, and Black and Latino kids are not. And so what I see in that data is that if there's inflation of any kind, it's in test scores, and that test scores continue to be the thing that benefit and privilege rich kids.
And that's the barrier, really, for kids.
Yeah, for a lot of, you know, I talked to a lot of low-income students who were great, including Shannon, who had incredible high school records. She was the valedictorian of her class, but whose test scores were not great. And that is a real obstacle for those students to get into the kind of highly selective institutions that they deserve to go to and where they tend to thrive when they are admitted.
It was interesting to read about enrollment managers. I don't think I even knew that expression. So who gets into these elite schools? What did you see?
Well, so it's different at different levels of institution. But so when enrollment management is sort of the new name for college admissions, and it's a much more complicated algorithmic version of admissions than you know, I remember from when I was a kid, and basically what it boils down to, though, is that colleges, the ones that don't have gigantic endowment, private institutions, sort of one tier down, which is a lot of institutions, they really need to take into account whether the students they admit are going to be able to pay. Private nonprofit institutions in this country are in real financial trouble. You know, 1 quarter of those institutions are now operating in the red, and there are lots more that are really close to that line. So they need to think about whether these students
So
can
if
pay.
you can pay, then you have a better shot of getting in?
Yeah.
I mean, let's basically?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that well-off kids benefit in college admissions. But in this tier of institutions, sort of, you know, private institutions that are one tier down from the very most selective institutions, their admissions people just have to think about, can this person pay our tuition? How much are they able to pay? How much?
Selective, you mentioned, I mean, do not turn their backs on. And down, we have the Jared Kushner story. I mean, that's not a hidden story, not just in your book. I mean, he got sent to Harvard after his father donates $2.5 million, and on paper does not have the qualifications. But he's just one of many, I suppose. Legacies, you talk about how legacy children get in. So there's definitely, all right, so let's talk about the options. If schools don't use the SAT or the ACT and they decide to do test optional, you just spend some time looking at, I believe this in Texas, where they use something called the top 10 rule. Want to tell us about that?
Sure. So the University of Texas, it's not only test optional, it's sort of test blind. There is this law that passed a decade or so ago in Texas that says that if you are it started out being the top 10%, now it's in the top 6% of your graduating class at any high school in Texas, you are automatically admitted to the University of Texas in Austin, which is the flagship college there. And that so it doesn't matter what your SAT scores are if you in that top 6% you get in. So it's a very different kind of freshman class that shows up in Austin than at similar flagship institutions like the University of Michigan or University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill or Virginia. It's much more diverse, both geographically. It sort of covers all of Texas, but it's also more diverse socioeconomically as well.
And it's also more diverse academically. I mean, you do point out, and I think this is something that we think about a lot, that not everyone, it's coming here in New York City. I mean, it's become an issue with specialized high schools. If you get rid of the exam and you go for the top 7% GPAs and Regents exam, you know, what is that student body going to look like? It's not going to be homogeneous in an academic sense either, because people come from different high schools with different levels of preparation. So what happens in Texas exactly? Is it, what are some of the pros and cons of this?
Right. I think it goes to the word you use, that that not as prepared academically, right? Because it depends what that means academically.
Well,
because I feel like the thing about the top 6% rule is that all of their students, if you're in the top 6% of any high school, you are a great student. You work hard. You know how to educate yourself. But it is absolutely true in Texas. There are lots of schools that don't have AP classes. There are lots of schools that have a ton of AP classes. There are lots of schools with not many resources. Lots of schools with lots. And so these students show up in Austin, and they do have different preparation. In the past, I think UT said, well, okay, it's sink or swim. Everyone's just got to take it from here, right? And so the students who came from the more low-income high schools were more likely to drop out. But a few years ago, the UT changed its approach and said, it's our job to help these students succeed. And they didn't dumb things down. They didn't lower their standards, but they gave those students a little extra help, a little extra support in the first year or two. Partly academically, some tutoring and some smaller classes, but more in terms of sort of like the sense of belonging that those students had on campus. And it was this huge transformation. The graduation rates among the low-income and first-generation students went way up over the past 6 or 7 years. So I think what I take away from that is that even when students, if they have that high grade point average that will get them into UT, even if they come from very different places, if they get the right kind of support, they can all succeed.
Well, you do mention Yvonne and the calculus struggles that she had, and of course her teacher, Yuri Treisman, is that his name? Well, I mean, that's a whole other topic of conversation for me, because he goes above and beyond what any professor or teacher could do, and I'm even questioning should do on some level, because teachers are always asked to do the extraordinary, and go beyond, and so he put so much effort in that, I don't know that other people would or could put that in. I mean, he's wonderful, and he really helps pull all his students through calculus. But she is a high achiever. She comes with a great GPA, but she struggles. And I think this is something that, we're dealing with now all the time. So there are certain supports you can put in there, but it's very hard, I think, for some of these students. I agree.
But what really struck me about Professor Treisman's experience with Yvonne is this low-income student, great student, second in her class at this public high school in western San Antonio. So when she got there, she had not done as much calculus as some of the other students who had already taken AP calculus, already gone through the class. You sat in those classes a lot. Yes, I sat there. I didn't learn much calculus, but I learned a lot about education, I think. So yes, it's true that Professor T worked hard, but Yvonne worked harder.
Yes, she did. She worked very hard too.
So he was able to inspire her. It wasn't like he was giving her the answers. He was able to teach her and to inspire her to learn calculus. And so in any other institution, she would, first of all, probably not be tracked into calculus. If she went to calculus, she probably wouldn't have passed it. But because UT and Professor Treisman went that extra mile, she's now a junior, she's a math major, she is doing great at this institution, and she's going to graduate and go on and have a career in the STEM field. So
she's very inspiring.
So yes, it's a lot of work, but it is a huge change. I mean, that class changed her life, and it changed the life of her family as well. So that extra effort, genuinely extra though it is, I think pays off in a huge way.
Of course it does, it does. But now, you talk a lot about selective schools and community colleges. Question that not everybody, but lots of people want to know, does it matter where you go to college?
Well, it's a complicated question to answer, and so in the aggregate, yes. So if you look at this economist Carolyn Hawksby did a remarkable study where she looked over many decades at where students went to college with different sorts of high school records and what their incomes were later on. And yes, the selectivity of the college that you attend is highly predictive of how much money you're going to make when you get out of school. Even two kids with the same record, if the school they go really affects it. So that's a little depressing, right?
Yeah, because we all can't go to Harvard,
exactly.
right?
But so I think on an individual level, it's important to remember that these are statistics, and it really is more important to go someplace where you are going to graduate, where you have a sense of belonging, where you're going to get a great education, and lots of kids go to less selective institutions and still have remarkable outcomes. But I think if we're looking at this as a social issue, it's important to understand that it's the institutions that have the biggest impact on social mobility that are so heavily populated by rich kids, right? So it's the kids who actually get the least advantage from the experience of attending those highly selective institutions that make up the largest population.
Of course, I do want to say at this point that CUNY, as you know, was recently cited as being one of the universities that is in the forefront, the engine of social mobility for students, that has put more low-income students into the middle class, one of the top universities in the country that has done that.
Yes, well,
so certainly, you can move up, and CUNY has certainly done that. But there is a conundrum that you mentioned, though. As a school goes test optional and takes in more students, then it becomes viewed as kind of less selective because then other students don't apply there. So then the idea for these low-income students having the advantage of going to a selective university dissipates somewhat for them because now the school is not viewed as selective. So I saw that as a problem, that a conundrum here. I don't really know how that works out, but I thought that was kind of interesting because you mentioned that. I think that
and so
everybody stops going. The high performers say, I'd rather go somewhere else.
It's true to a certain degree. I mean, most schools find that when they go test optional, they get more applicants rather than fewer. And the two schools that I focused on the most, test optional schools, were DePaul University in Chicago and Trinity in Hartford. And both of them feel like the switch to test optional not only increased their applicants, but also increased their results. That it didn't hurt their graduation rates at all, and it let them. It doesn't change what who a school lets in altogether. Trinity is still letting in a lot of rich white guys.
Sure, they are, to pay the bills for sure, right?
But it does allow an admissions officer to consider in a different way the applications of students who might really benefit, not only benefit from that education, but might really benefit that campus as well.
Right now, we're noticing, at least I'm seeing, there's a conversation in our country that is anti-higher education. Republicans are being cited as very prominent in this conversation. Why do you think that is?
It's a good question. So when you look at the polling data about higher education, it is almost entirely a Republican issue, right? So there's been this huge switch.
They all went to higher ed, politicians,
I mean. So, and it's only been in the last 5 years. I've never seen a poll that looks quite like this, where a line is just sort of everyone feels, higher education is a pretty good thing, and then in around 2014, on the Republican side, it just drops off a cliff. So maybe that has to do with reality, and maybe there are certainly reasons to be skeptical about higher education. I certainly am sometimes, but it seems like because it is so partisan, because the Republican number switched so radically while the Democratic number didn't.
Are so negative now?
I think it has to do with media and politics. There's been, if you spend time reading the op-ed page of the Wall Street Journal and watching Fox News and Fox Business, there are a lot of articles and a lot of segments about how bad college is, and how pointless it is, and how much it costs, and how it doesn't prepare you for the future, including, in my opinion, a lot of dubious statistics. And I think that message has really gotten out, at least to a certain part of the population.
I think college helps you learn how to think. And we'll just let it rest right there, okay? So the big question is college worth it?
So the short answer is yes. So when you talk to economists, they cite this number called the college wage premium, and it is a factor you can look at for any year in American history. How much more do people with college degrees make than people without college degrees? And right now that number is large, and it's as high as it's ever been. So a college degree is extremely valuable in today's economy.
And there's a new study that just came out, maybe you've seen it, that said that even if you don't graduate, It contradicts earlier studies. It says it just looks at Texas high school graduates, over 200,000 of them from the year 2000 on, and shows unequivocally that even if they didn't finish college, they have a bigger earnings advantage than we thought, so that they that it's worth it. So I just came across that.
I've seen different data
this
in
is
terms
very
of that.
new. It just came out, and
definitely graduating helps. So
graduating certainly
makes
helps.
a big
No
difference,
argument.
but yeah.
Absolutely. So we only have a half a minute left, maybe. So what do you want us to take away from this book? What would you like to see happen?
Well, I think there's this urge for there to be like one villain and one switch that we can just throw, whether it's the government or Harvard or somebody, just do one thing differently and everything will be fine. And really what I conclude is that what we need is a cultural shift, and that involves all of us, educators, parents, alumni, students, citizens, to say our collective higher education, public higher education benefits us all. We have turned it into a system that is very much a competitive private one, where we just try to get what we can out of the higher education system for ourselves and our kids. And we haven't always thought that way, and we don't need to think that way. And if we think about higher education as something that benefits us all, I think we would be making very different decisions about how that system runs.
I want to thank you so much for joining us. Your book, The Years That Matter Most, was provocative, engaging, and really taught me a lot of things I didn't know, and really just made me think a lot about this whole situation. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
Don't go away. We'll be right back with our Ed Bites. Welcome back to this edition of Ed Bites. To guess or not to guess on exams? That's just one of the questions. According to the Hechinger Report, researchers with NWEA, producer of the Measures of Academic Progress test, have developed a way to determine whether students guess when taking computerized exams. Their findings? Test questions that include more reading lead to guessing, and male and black students are more likely to guess than other students. With so much reading occurring on screen rather than paper these days, educators have been examining the effects on comprehension of these two modalities. A survey of education studies shows students of all ages tend to absorb more on paper than on screen, especially when reading nonfiction. The benefits are small but consistent across studies. The studies don't examine the potential advantages of digital add-ons that improve interactivity. We have reported on similar studies before, but it bears repeating when confirmed again. 4 recent studies highlight the positive effects of increasing money for schools. According to Chalkbeat, research indicates that spending additional money on schools leads to higher test scores and college admission rates. Significantly, students from lower-income households benefit the most. Who doesn't like a nap? Unfortunately, they are frowned upon in the workplace and in school. Yet Education Week reports on a study in the journal Nature that found that taking naps in the afternoon could help teenagers boost learning and memory. Researchers found that students who took an afternoon nap outperformed their peers who got more sleep at night. Sleep on that. That's it for this edition of EdCast. Welcome back to a new academic year. We look forward to another season of bringing you the important stories in education. Thanks for tuning in.
We'd like to hear from you. Please send your thoughts and comments to cunyedcast@gmail.com.